They looked me straight in the eye in a room full of people and said the one sentence that cut deeper than any insult I'd ever heard in my career. Here, we decide what you're worth. Imagine that for a second. Years of late nights, weekends, lost ideas, stolen but never forgotten. And in the end, my value was reduced to a single dismissive sentence tossed out like an afterthought. My throat tightened. I wanted to fight back, to shout, to remind them of every project I had carried, every deadline I had saved. But I didn't. Not a word. I just sat there staring at the glass walls around me, realizing that this humiliation was meant to be seen. It wasn't just about me. It was about control. Inside, though, something cracked. My silence wasn't weakness. It was the first spark of resistance. Because when someone tells you that your worth is theirs to decide, it plants a dangerous seed, the thought that maybe, just maybe, they're wrong. And that thought can grow into something unstoppable. That moment, as painful as it was, became the beginning of a story I never saw coming. A story of betrayal, strategy, and a quiet kind of revenge. Before I share what happened next, let me ask you something. Where are you listening from right now? And more importantly, have you ever been made to feel invisible at work? Like your value could be erased with a single sentence? Leave a comment if this reminds you of something. Your story might be the one that helps someone else feel less alone. I walked out of that glass-walled conference room and let the door close behind me. The noise of the office was still there, phones ringing, keyboards tapping, colleagues laughing in the break room, but to me it all sounded distant, muffled, almost unreal. My chest felt heavy, as if their words were still pressing down on me. I didn't go back to my desk. Instead, I slipped into the restroom, the only place where I could be alone for a moment. One of the stalls had a broken lock, so I leaned against the door and just stood there, breathing slowly, staring at the tiled floor. It wasn't tears that came, not even anger at first. It was this strange emptiness, the kind that creeps in when you realize you've been seen as replaceable all along. I pulled out my phone, maybe out of habit, maybe just to distract myself. That's when I saw it, a notification from LinkedIn. A message from Noah Price, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Dinner, let's talk. Short, casual, but it hit me harder than anything else that day. For a moment, I hesitated. Meeting Noah would mean stepping into unknown territory, into conversations that could change everything. Was I ready for that? Could I risk even being seen with him? My company wouldn't forgive it. And yet something in me whispered that maybe this was the door I had been waiting for, the one I had been too afraid to open. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. My heart pounded louder than the chatter outside, louder than the echo of Colin's voice in my head. Finally, I typed 3 words. Dinner sounds good, and I pressed send. The screen dimmed, but my pulse didn't slow down. Because deep down, I knew this single choice made in the quiet of a restroom stall was about to pull me into a story far bigger than I had ever planned for. The restaurant was dimly lit, the kind of place where conversations blended into the hum of soft jazz and clinking glasses. I arrived early, though I would never admit it, and chose a corner table where I could see the door. My palms were slightly damp, but I kept my posture straight, rehearsing what I might say, what I might not dare to reveal. When Noah walked in, it felt like a memory stepping out of the past. He was sharper now, suit pressed, expression calm, eyes scanning the room until they found me. He smiled, and for a second I almost forgot why we were meeting. We exchanged pleasantries, the usual small talk about the city, about how time had flown. But beneath it, I sensed the unspoken reason he had reached out. He wanted to know what I knew, and I wanted to know how far I could trust him. Finally, he leaned in and said, "You wouldn't have agreed to meet if you weren't ready to talk." I set my fork down, looked him straight in the eye, and replied, "I've seen what no one else at GravesTech wants to admit. Their system is flawed." They've built walls of glass, and every day I watch the cracks spreading." Noah didn't interrupt. He just listened, nodding slightly, as if confirming thoughts he had already suspected. My voice was steady, but inside, my heart was racing. This was the first time I had spoken these words out loud. Then I said the part I had been holding back. "I have a solution, a framework I've been developing quietly. It's stronger, cleaner, faster. But if we do this together, my name goes first on the patent. Non-negotiable." For a moment, silence sat between us. Then Noah leaned back, smiled again, and said simply, "Deal." I sipped my water to hide the tremor in my hands, because deep down, I knew that one word had just set something in motion I could never take back. By day, I walked the halls of GravesTech as if nothing had changed. My badge still worked, my desk still sat in the corner of the open office, and my colleagues barely noticed me slipping in and out. I kept my head down, eyes on my screen, pretending to scroll through endless reports. To them, I looked quiet, maybe even burned out. That was exactly what I wanted. Colin, of course, noticed. He had a way of circling like a hawk, waiting for weakness. One morning, as I passed him by the coffee machine, he smirked and said loud enough for others to hear, "Still on your little spiritual retreat, huh?" A few people chuckled. I forced a smile, nodded, and walked away without a word. Inside, I burned, but I couldn't let him see it. Silence for me had become its own weapon. By night, the mask came off. I sat in my small apartment in Brooklyn, hair pulled back, laptop glowing against the darkness. On one monitor, the old company's architecture flaws I knew too well. On the other, lines of code for Aegis, the system I was building with Titan Labs. It was like living in two parallel worlds, one crumbling, one rising. Every keystroke felt like a secret rebellion. I studied every clause in my contract, every policy, looking for traps. That's when I found it. No non-compete clause, no intellectual property claim on what I created outside their walls. Legally, I was untouchable. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to control. Still, the tension was suffocating. By day, I was invisible. By night, I was alive. But keeping both lives separate was like balancing on a razor's edge. One slip, one careless word, and everything would collapse. And then, one evening, as I pushed another commit to our hidden server, a new notification lit up my screen. One I hadn't expected, and one that could change everything. The convention center in Chicago was buzzing with energy. Bright banners hung from the ceiling, each promising the future of technology, faster, smarter, more efficient. Crowds moved like tides, clusters of investors, engineers, and founders brushing past each other in a blur of conversations. I blended in, just another face with a badge hanging from my neck. But inside, every step felt heavy with purpose. I wasn't there to network casually. I had one goal, to place Aegis into the right hands without ever saying its name out loud. I found my moment during a coffee break, standing in line, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. It was Eli from Nova Capital, a strategist whose influence stretched far beyond funding. His word could shift entire markets. I turned, greeted him with the kind of warmth that hides intent, and before long we were sitting at a small table tucked into the corner of the lobby cafe. We started with harmless topics, the city, the turnout, the endless panels. But soon I leaned in and said quietly, "You ever notice how some systems are like a lid that never quite fits the jar? No matter how you force it, the gap stays, and over time, the whole thing spills." Eli's eyes sharpened. He knew I wasn't talking about jars. He nodded slowly, then asked, "And what if someone had the right lid?" I smiled, careful not to say too much. "Then you wouldn't waste years cleaning up a mess that should have never happened." The air between us grew charged. He leaned back, studying me, and finally said, "If you're serious, we'll need an NDA before this conversation goes any further." I pulled a folded document from my bag, already prepared. He laughed softly at my readiness, then signed without hesitation. As his pen touched paper, I realized something. This wasn't just a casual chat over coffee. This was the first domino tipping forward. And when Eli slipped the signed NDA back across the table, he added one sentence that sent a shiver through me, one that hinted my window of secrecy might be closing faster than I thought. I knew the time had come when simply showing up at GravesTech felt like wearing someone else's skin. Every day was heavier than the last, every hallway colder, every forced smile thinner. The decision wasn't sudden. It had been building piece by piece until it finally settled in my chest like a stone. I didn't need drama. I didn't need to slam doors or shout across meetings. What I needed was closure, delivered in the quietest way possible. So that night, I sat at my kitchen table with the city lights flickering outside my window. Laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard, I began to type. 3 sentences. That was all. Effective immediately, I am stepping away from GravesTech. I appreciate the years of experience I gained here. I wish the team the best moving forward. No explanations, no apologies, no window for negotiation, just finality. I read the email twice, then a third time. My finger lingered on the mouse, and for a moment I thought about the years I had given them. The sleepless nights, the impossible deadlines, the projects that carried their name but not mine. All reduced now to 3 sentences that could fit on a single phone screen. I hit send. Almost instantly, my access began to dissolve. One by one, the company's digital walls pushed me out. My Slack channels vanished, my calendar emptied. Files I had built disappeared behind permissions I no longer had. By morning, my badge would be nothing more than plastic. And yet, instead of fear, I felt lighter. It was as if those 3 sentences had peeled away the weight I'd been carrying for years. Quiet resignation became my sharpest blade. Still, I knew this silence wouldn't last. A message like that sent without warning was bound to spark questions, maybe even suspicion. And as I closed my laptop, another notification appeared in the corner of the screen. One I hadn't expected, and one that would set the next stage into motion. It didn't take long for the ripples to show. By the end of the week, I heard whispers from friends still inside GravesTech. The first sign was subtle. A major client canceled a scheduled call without explanation. Then another rescheduled, this time indefinitely. Meetings that once filled the calendar were quietly disappearing. Colin tried to keep his grip on the steering wheel. In an all-hands meeting, he stood at the front of the room, chin high, voice sharp. "Let them try," he barked when someone asked about rumors of a new competitor. "We're untouchable." But his tone was too tight, his smile too thin. The room didn't feel convinced, and neither did he. Meanwhile, I was watching from a distance. Each update that trickled out only confirmed what I already knew. The cracks were widening. The system they had buried under buzzwords and empty promises was now exposed. And I wasn't just a ghost from their past anymore. I was a shadow on their future. One friend forwarded me a snippet from a Slack channel I no longer had access to. It was frantic employees speculating about missed deadlines, about a client who had hinted they were exploring alternatives. My name wasn't mentioned, not yet, but I could feel it like thunder rumbling just beyond the horizon. I wasn't sitting idle either. Around this time, I filed the provisional patent for Aegis. One simple move, a piece of paperwork tucked into the system, but it meant everything. From that moment on, the idea was legally mine. They couldn't touch it, couldn't steal it, couldn't even pretend it was theirs. Ironically, Colin had waved away the same concept months earlier, calling it redundant. That word still echoed in my mind like an accidental confession. For GravesTech, the storm was only beginning, and as the foundation shook beneath them, I knew the real strike hadn't even landed yet. Because while they scrambled to hold their ground, I was already preparing the one move that would make their world collapse in front of everyone. The conference room at Titan Labs was nothing like GravesTech. No glass walls designed to intimidate, no hollow speeches about synergy or culture. Just a long oak table, a contract folder in the center, and a silence so heavy it made every pen scratch sound louder than it should. Eli from Nova Capital sat across from me, his tie loosened, his expression calm but calculating. He flipped through the final pages, glanced at Noah, then at me. "So this is it," he said. "We're officially in." I nodded, though inside my chest was pounding. Months of quiet building, sleepless nights, and hidden moves had led to this. I wasn't just selling an idea, I was reclaiming the future they told me I wasn't worth. When the pen hit the signature line, something shifted in the room. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I felt it. This wasn't just a deal. This was validation. But I wasn't done. "One more thing," I said, sliding a marked-up draft of the press release across the table. The others glanced at each other, curious. "I want this line included word for word, led by former head of innovation at GravesTech." For a second, silence. Then Eli let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "That's going to sting." "That's the point," I replied evenly. The wording wasn't about ego. It was about precision. I wanted the world to know exactly who had walked away and exactly what GravesTech had lost. A dagger slipped between the ribs, disguised as a headline. We set the release under embargo, scheduled to go live at 10:30 a.m. next Tuesday, the same time as GravesTech's all-hands meeting. Timing wasn't just important, it was everything. I closed the folder, exhaled, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself a smile. The pieces were set, the trap primed. All that remained was the moment of impact. And as I left the room, phone buzzing in my pocket, a new message lit the screen, one that hinted GravesTech might already sense the knife was coming. The morning of the release time felt different, slower, heavier. I sat in a quiet cafe in Brooklyn, a corner seat near the window, my laptop open but untouched. The screen displayed the press release draft, already scheduled to go live at exactly 10:30 a.m. My eyes kept drifting to the small digital clock in the corner. 10:12. Outside the city moved as if nothing unusual was about to happen. People hurried to work, taxis honked, the rhythm of New York carried on. But for me, every passing minute felt like another weight pressing down on my chest. I sipped my coffee, though it had gone cold, and kept checking my phone. One group chat at Titan Labs was buzzing, Noah confirming final details with the PR team, Eli reminding us of the investor call that would follow. Short, efficient messages, but each one reminded me that we were seconds away from changing the narrative. 10, 20. At GravesTech headquarters across the river, hundreds of employees were logging into their weekly all-hands. I pictured the large screen, the nervous chatter, the empty reassurance Colin would try to deliver. They thought they controlled the script. They had no idea another story was waiting to break right under their noses. 10:25. My heart was racing now. I tapped my fingers against the table to steady myself. This wasn't just business, it was personal. Every word in that press release carried the sting of every dismissal, every smirk, every time I had been told I didn't matter. 10:28. A notification popped up. Press release embargo, locked and queued. There was no turning back now. 10:29. I closed my eyes, breathed in, breathed out. For a split second, I felt the old fear rising. What if it wasn't enough? What if they still found a way to twist the story? And then the clock hit 10:30. My screen refreshed automatically. And what I saw wasn't just the press release. It was something else, something I hadn't expected to appear at the same moment. At exactly 10:30, the screen lit up with the headline we had crafted days earlier. Titan Labs secures partnership with Nova Capital, led by former head of innovation at GravesTech. The words felt like a blade sliding silently into place. In that same moment across the river, GravesTech's all hands was in full swing. I wasn't in the room, but I could imagine it perfectly. The big projection screen, the rows of employees, Colin standing at the front with his rehearsed confidence. And then suddenly, every phone in the room buzzing, every laptop notification flashing the same headline. One friend later told me that the silence was unbearable. First a few gasps, then whispers, then an avalanche of side conversations. People refreshing their feeds, clicking links, staring in disbelief. The official meeting stream froze mid-sentence. Colin's face drained of color. The leadership team exchanged frantic looks, trying to figure out if what they were seeing was real. And it was real, irrefutable, public, permanent. For me, sitting in that cafe, the moment didn't feel loud at all. It felt still. Like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Every brick, every pane of glass falling exactly the way physics intended. There was no satisfaction in shouting, no need for revenge speeches, just the calm recognition that the balance had shifted and there was no going back. I leaned back in my chair, letting the noise of the cafe drown out the chaos happening miles away. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel replaceable. The world finally saw what they had tried to bury. And yet, as my phone vibrated with new notifications, emails, messages, calls I hadn't expected, one name flashed across the screen that made me pause. A name I hadn't seen in years, tied directly to GravesTech's deepest secrets. The hours after the announcement felt surreal. My phone was a storm of notifications, emails from recruiters, messages from old colleagues, connection requests pouring in on LinkedIn. For years, I had been the quiet one, overlooked, dismissed. Now suddenly, I was the headline. People who had barely acknowledged me in the halls were typing out congratulations, pretending they had always seen my potential. I didn't answer most of them. Some bridges didn't need to be rebuilt. At Titan Labs, the mood was electric. The team popped open bottles of champagne, laughter echoing through the office. For them, it was a victory in business. For me, it was something deeper. It was the quiet vindication that every long night, every slight, every time I was told I wasn't enough had led me here. I let myself smile, even laugh a little, but part of me stayed silent, soaking it all in. Meanwhile, across the city, GravesTech was reeling. Reports started leaking clients demanding answers, investors pulling calls, internal channels locked down. Colin, the man who once told me we decide what you're worth, had gone silent. He couldn't spend this, not when my name was plastered on headlines tied to the deal that had slipped through his fingers. But I didn't need to say a word. The silence spoke for me. Sometimes the strongest statement is no statement at all. Later that night, as the city lights flickered outside my window, I sat alone with a glass of wine, scrolling through the flood of articles. Each headline felt like a weightlifting. I should have felt complete. And yet, when a new message arrived, this time from someone I hadn't expected, someone tied to the very roots of GravesTech, I realized the story wasn't finished. Victory, it seemed, was only the beginning. In the days that followed, the dust began to settle. GravesTech stumbled, their leadership scrambling to patch holes that were too wide to hide. Colin kept his silence, though I heard whispers that his bonus had vanished along with the deal. For someone who once believed he controlled everyone's value, losing mine cost him more than he ever expected. As for me, I didn't need revenge speeches or victory parades. The headlines spoke for themselves. Titan Labs moved forward with new energy, and I finally had the freedom to create without the shadow of being erased. There was a strange peace in that. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. The kind of peace that comes when you finally take back what was always yours. Looking back, I realized the real turning point wasn't the deal or the press release or even the collapse of GravesTech. It was the moment I chose to stop letting someone else define me. The moment in that restroom stall when I typed out 3 simple words, "Dinner sounds good." Every step after that was built on a choice to trust myself, even when I was terrified. The truth is, workplaces will come and go, titles will rise and fall, but your worth doesn't live in someone else's hands. It lives in what you build, what you protect, and what you refuse to surrender. And that's the part I carry with me now. Not the chaos, not the headlines, but the reminder that silence, strategy, and self-belief can speak louder than any insult shouted across a boardroom. So I'll leave you with this. Have you ever been in a place where someone tried to tell you your value, and did you believe them, even for a moment? Share your thoughts in the comments. You never know, your story might be the one that reminds someone else they're not alone.